The moment I stepped into the suite, the air seemed thick, oppressive, and charged with an intensity that only betrayal could bring. My gaze fell upon Isabella, my wife, her arms entwined around another man's neck. Their laughter rang through the room, sharp and cutting, slicing the silence like a blade. Yet, I didn't feel the anger one might expect, nor the crushing heartbreak. Instead, what filled me was an icy calm, a crystalline clarity that sliced through the disbelief. They hadn't noticed me standing there, and that was their first mistake. They thought they were clever, thought their secrets were safe. But I had known all along. Their lies were already unraveling, and they were completely unaware that they were mere pawns in a much larger game. A game they would lose. From the outside, our life was a portrait of perfection. Isabella, a celebrated architect, graced the covers of prestigious magazines with her groundbreaking designs. Admiration followed her wherever she went, from gala evenings to glittering fundraisers. Together, we were lauded as the perfect pair, a power couple, her artistic brilliance seamlessly complementing my strategic acumen. I was Gabriel Moretti, a financial strategist with influence stretching from corporate boardrooms to the most exclusive clubs of Madrid. Our lives seemed like a fairy tale, a dream curated for the world to envy. But fairy tales are never without their shadows. The cracks began as subtle signs, so faint they were easy to ignore, a missed dinner here, an unusual excuse there. She started coming home late, her explanations polished, her smile weary. Client meetings ran late, she'd say, kicking off her heels with a sigh as though the weight of success was her only burden. Yet, there was always that faint trace of unfamiliar perfume clinging to her clothes, a note that didn't belong. I dismissed it, attributing it to her glamorous world, a world teeming with admirers and distractions. Surely, that explained everything. But excuses hardened into habits. Late nights turned into unexplained weekends away. The intimate moments we once shared were replaced by an unsettling distance. A charity auction marked the first undeniable fracture. She stood beside me, breathtaking in an emerald gown that commanded every eye in the room. Her smile sparkled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She seemed present yet unreachable. Her phone buzzed discreetly on the table. I noticed the brief glance she gave it, the flicker of unease before she quickly looked away. A name flashed across the screen, Raphael. And in that instant, my world shifted. The facade of our life, once so carefully constructed, splintered. I didn't confront her that night. Not yet. The name Raphael lingered in my mind, gnawing at me with a relentless urgency. That night, while she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring into the darkness. My instinct screamed at me. Finally, unable to resist, I slipped from the bed, moving silently to where her phone lay charging in the living room. Her messages were locked, of course, but her email was not. My heart pounded as I scrolled, and there it was, a message from Raphael. The words seared into my mind. Last night was unforgettable. I can still feel your warmth. Same time next week. A quiet fury took root in me, sharp and cold. I returned to bed, my resolve solidifying. She had no idea I knew. That was her second mistake. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye as always, her smile casual, unbothered, the same practiced expression she had perfected over the years. But I saw through it now. As the door closed behind her, I made a decision. I would dismantle her lies. Days turned into an obsession. I sifted through her credit card statements, uncovering receipts for lavish dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, intimate places meant for whispered conversations. Her calendar revealed overlapping meetings and suspiciously timed absences. Then there was the Valencia, a luxury hotel where she'd checked in twice, her name on the bookings, with Rafael Morales listed as her guest. Each discovery tightened the knot of betrayal, every piece of evidence sharpening my resolve. I followed her, blending into the background of her world. Late nights at work always led to the same place, the Valencia. She was cautious, glancing over her shoulder, but not careful enough. One night, I saw him. Raphael. He greeted her with a familiarity that spoke volumes, his arm wrapping around her waist as she leaned into him. Her smile, radiant and unguarded, was one I hadn't seen in years. That moment confirmed everything, but I didn't let anger overtake me. Not yet. This had to be methodical. Revenge wouldn't suffice, it had to be justice. The opportunity came a week later. I invited Isabella to dinner, cooking her favorite dish, paella with saffron and fresh seafood, paired with an expensive rioja. She arrived late, as I had expected, her cheeks flushed, her hair slightly tousled. Her appearance, which once enchanted me, now served only as confirmation. "Long day?" I asked, pouring her a glass of wine. My tone was steady, giving nothing away. "Exhausting," she replied, slipping into her seat. "But worth it. We landed the contract." "Did you?" I said, setting down my glass and meeting her gaze. "Or did Raphael land something else tonight?" Her smile froze, her eyes widening in a flicker of panic before she regained her composure. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly, betraying her. The room seemed to close in around us, heavy with unspoken truths. She had no idea what was coming, but she would soon. The moments stretched into eternity as I leaned back in my chair, allowing silence to settle heavily in the room. Isabella sat across from me, her eyes darting nervously as I reached into the briefcase by my side. I withdrew a carefully organized stack of papers, each sheet meticulously curated evidence of her betrayal. Without a word, I placed the pile on the table between us, its weight symbolic of the lies and deceit it represented. She hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the stack. Her face shifted from confusion to horror as she skimmed the pages, printouts of hotel bookings, receipts for extravagant dinners, and screenshots of emails. The damning evidence spoke louder than words. "Care to explain this?" I asked quietly, my voice cutting through the room with a cold edge. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. Finally, she managed a whispered, "Gabriel, it's not." "Don't insult me by saying it's not what it looks like," I interrupted, my composure cracking as anger seeped into my tone. "Because it looks exactly like what it is. You've been sneaking around with Raphael, lying to my face, and destroying everything we built." Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over, but they stirred nothing in me. No sadness, no pity, only a grim satisfaction as I watched her world begin to crumble. "Gabriel, I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice fragile. "I didn't mean." "Stop," I snapped, cutting her off. My voice was sharper now, stripped of all warmth. "This isn't the time for apologies. This is the time for consequences." The next day, I executed the next phase of my plan with precision. I booked the same suite at the Valencia where Isabella and Raphael had so often met. There was a cruel poetry to it, using the stage of their betrayal as the setting for their downfall. Without telling Isabella, I called Raphael directly, using a burner phone and a fabricated identity. I posed as a potential investor, suggesting a meeting at the Valencia in the suite they frequented. When the day arrived, I got there early. The room felt heavy with anticipation as I arranged everything. Photographs, receipts, emails, and a recording of Isabella's tearful confession from the night before. Every piece was a testament to their deceit, each carefully chosen to leave no room for denial. Raphael arrived first, his usual arrogance on full display as he poured himself a drink, lounging as though the suite belonged to him. Moments later, Isabella entered. Her face was pale, her movements hesitant. The moment she saw me standing in the corner, her expression froze in terror. "Gabriel," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "What are you?" "Please sit," I interrupted, my tone calm but commanding. Raphael, now visibly uneasy, glanced between us. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "This," I said, gesturing to the evidence spread out on the coffee table, "is the end of your little game." I turned to Raphael, my voice growing colder. "Nice ring, by the way," I said, nodding toward the gold band on his finger. "Looks like you're just as deceitful as my wife." His jaw tightened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "You don't scare me," he spat, trying to maintain his bravado. "You should be scared," I replied, my voice low and deliberate. "Because what's coming next will destroy you." I placed a USB drive on the table, its sleek surface gleaming under the light. "This contains everything. Emails, receipts, photos, enough to ruin you both professionally and personally. I wonder how Sophia will react when she sees it." At the mention of his wife, Raphael's confidence faltered. He glanced at Isabella, whose eyes were wide with fear. "And you, Isabella," I continued, turning my focus to her. "The moment this goes public, your career, your reputation, it's all over. You'll be nothing but a cautionary tale. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging like a guillotine poised to fall. They understood then that the game was over. True to my word, I sent the USB drive anonymously to Sophia, Raphael's wife. I could almost picture her discovering it in their pristine living room, her perfect world crumbling as she uncovered the truth. But I didn't stop there. Using the evidence I had gathered, I leaked incriminating details about Raphael's business dealings, proof of shady contracts, bribery, and tax evasion. Within days, the whispers turned into headlines, and his business partners forced him to resign. As for Isabella, I tipped off her most prominent client about the scandal. It didn't take much for them to sever ties with her. One evening, she called me, her voice trembling. "Gabriel, everything's falling apart. My projects, my reputation. I don't know what to do." I listened in silence, unmoved. When she finally paused, desperation heavy in her words, I responded coldly. "Actions have consequences, Isabella. Yours are finally catching up to you." A month later, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, a glass of scotch in hand. Below, the city stretched out endlessly, its lights a dazzling contrast to the darkness I had emerged from. Behind me, classical music played softly, filling the space with an eerie calm. Isabella was gone. Her belongings, once scattered throughout our home, were packed into boxes she would never return to claim. Raphael, too, had disappeared from the public eye, his career and reputation in tatters. The storm they had unleashed had consumed them, leaving me standing unbroken. In their betrayal, I had found clarity, a ruthless teacher that stripped away illusions and left only stark truths. I had been tempered by the fire, and now I stood stronger, sharper, and unyielding. Taking the last sip of my scotch, I whispered to the night, "Sometimes, the storm doesn't destroy you, it makes you stronger."